5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and as always, thank you for having this hearing today. I wanted to ask Ms. DeBerry if she would talk about cities where crime has increased, where there has been reform, and cities where crime has increased where there has not been reform. I also would like to ask Ms. Richardson the same thing. Is there a big difference is what I'm looking for? Cities that have had reforms, do they have an explosion in crimes, and cities that do not? Has crime gone down?
Yes, Ms. Bass, we've seen no difference in cities that have reform or don't have reform, in cities that are in places that are rural or urban. In North Carolina, we have 100 counties. There's been an increase in violence across all 100 counties, irrespective of whether there are criminal legal reforms in process or not.
So if the reforms, I mean, then if there's no evidence for reforms leading to an increase in crime, what's the reason then that crime has increased in both areas?
Well, I think the pandemic itself has cut off resources to people who are the most vulnerable in our community. We know that poverty drives violence, and we've seen since 2022 the largest increase in poverty in history. We also have seen an explosion in gun sales, and that legal guns are now used in many crimes. And I think also as a prosecutor, we see fewer people willing to come forward and talk about what is happening in their communities out of fear of retaliation.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson.
I would agree with that assessment, and thank you for the question. The National Urban Leagues represents communities all across this country in urban, rural, and suburban areas, and we've seen a dramatic increase in violent crime everywhere. And so I think it is important for us to look to the underlying factors of that. Obviously, we know about the root causes and challenges in our community, but the pandemic really laid bare a lot of inequities that we've seen. It resulted in job insecurity and instability. It reflected in more homelessness and housing issues, as well as mental health and trauma. And I would argue that we're not just seeing those in the community generally, but we're also seeing those issues in law enforcement as well. And so I think it's critically important that we focus on addressing these root causes and putting more funding and resources into social services.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you, even on screen. I understand that in your city, you have a problem with homelessness, just like in Los Angeles, and that you've had a significant reduction. And I wanted to know, number one, was there an association with crime in the unhoused population? And what have you been able to do that has made it so different?
And the answer is yes. And we have reduced homelessness by about 55 to 57%. And even in the last year, we've reduced.
Can you come to Los Angeles?
So, but it is a coalition. It's a network of 100 different groups, organizations that have a coalition of the homeless that have come together. And Houston and Harris County have placed unprecedented funding on reducing it. And it's not just about providing a housing unit, but wraparound supportive services. So that program is working well.
Was there an association in the unhoused population and criminal activity?
There was.
Have you been able to reduce that as well?
And the answer is yes. And it's also a part of our crisis intervention, where the focus is on addressing the homeless situation as well as mental behavioral health issues, because that also runs rampant within this particular community.
Did you increase your arrest rate and increase the number of officers? Did that contribute to that reduction as well?
Congresswoman Bass, we have instituted police reforms. We have increased the police budget in 2020 as well as in 2021. And at the same time, we have seen rising crime. So we have never defunded. In fact, in June of 2020, we increased our police budget by 13%, and we also instituted the reforms. What we are seeing is a huge criminal case backlog because during Hurricane Harvey, many of our courts were taken offline. And then, of course, during COVID, many of our courts were taken offline. And now we are seeing a proliferation of guns all over the place. And when you add all of those elements in, even with increasing the police budget, crime is going.
So gun reform would be helpful then, huh?
Absolutely, no question.
Thank you. I think
Young
my
lady's
is
time
up.
has expired.